Okay, so Dreambooth, all well and good, but why do my results suck? Why am I getting this? I'm seeing this on Reddit, but here I am getting this. What's up with that? I was trying to make a meme involving one of my favorite streamers, Hasan Abi, who's like he's known for being like a landowner and a landlord in America. And I was getting images like this. And now, using like knowledge, I'm able to get images like this. So what did I do? I went ahead and I went and read the paper, which you could do as well, because it's actually pretty readable. There's not even that much math in it. Okay, so starting at the very beginning, like, what paper are we talking about? What paper is this? Which one? We're talking about this paper here, Dreambooth, fine-tuning text-to-image diffusion models for subject-driven generation. Now, this was published on the 25th of August, so like donkey's years in the machine learning world. But that's the paper that all this Dreambooth stuff is coming from. It's the innovations that these people made. And basically, they sum up this really basic problem, which is that latent diffusion models, really good at generating cool things, but they don't do identity preservation. Sometimes what you want is an image of a man, walking into his house, and you want like 4 images of him doing that in a sequence for a comic or a movie. That's something that humans generally want, and diffusion models can't do that. They can give you men walking into houses all you want, but they can't give you like the same man. Okay, and why is that? Well, I'm going to read you kind of a scary quote from the paper, and you're going to have to promise not to freak out, okay? Even the most detailed textual description of an object may yield instances with different appearances. And I think this is really cool, right? In order to get the models to generate a thing, you have to be able to refer to that thing. So you can get the models to generate a dog by saying dog. And it takes that dog signifier and it plots it against its prior understanding of dog, and it gives you a dog from out of that pool of its understanding, right? Or, in some cases, it has signifiers that are like very particular. Like for instance, if you try to signify a Donald Trump, it then takes its prior knowledge of Donald Trump and then gives you an image of Donald Trump according to its understanding. But let's say what I want is my Uncle Jack, or I see a really cool picture of a man, carrying an ice cream, and I want a picture of him smoking a pipe instead. There is no signifier I can use to communicate to the model that I want this particular man. He's an unknown. He's not in the model's prior learning. So it has no way of creating a visual interpretation of him. Okay, cool, awesome. So how do we resolve this? What's the solution? So the Dreambooth guys were like, great, we'll just fine-tune the model, which is just a fancy way of saying we'll retrain the model, and we'll give it some 4 or 5 images of a subject that we're interested in, and we'll give it a new signifier. And we'll say, hey, model, link this signifier with that subject. And then for everyone afterwards, you have my Uncle Jack in the model's pool of knowledge, and you can draw on that signifier whenever you want to summon an image of my Uncle Jack. Great. And of course, you'd think, wow, that probably is going to be really hard to do. And it was. It was very hard to do, and they spent a lot of time and intelligence doing that. So thanks very much to you guys, the paper author people. Nice, good, thank you. But that was all boring. This is all boring academic stuff. Oh, how does it work under the hood, blah, blah, blah. You want tips. That's what you're here for. So I'm going to give you those tips. Okay, tip number 1. Don't use a common identifier, which is to say, like, don't use anything that the model is already using and already knows about. Because, and I'll give you a quote from the authors again, this one's very nice, it's easy to understand. The model has to both learn to disentangle them from their original meaning and to re-entangle them to reference our subject. I actually got caught up with this because I was trying to get images of Hasan Piker, the landlord guy. I had the signifier Hasan, and with that signifier, all the images I was generating had like a very distinctive Middle Eastern feel. So obviously, just the word Hasan, the name Hasan seems a bit Middle Eastern-y, and that carried over. I tried again with the signifier H-Piker, and I got a much more Anglo-looking version of Hasan. Okay, so what signifier should you use? You should use an uncommon 3-letter sequence, like SKS, or PQW, or something like that. And apparently that's what they got the best results with. Subject images. My recommendation is to use at least 40. In the paper, they show these really, really nice results they got from just 3 images, where all 3 images are even pretty similar, with the subject in like more or less the same setting and more or less the same pose. And they have these really nice results that come from that. I was not able to replicate that with that many images. I tried with 5 images of my subject and the results were not good. They were like quite terrible. And I tried a whole bunch of different ways of training and switching around hyperparameters. None of it worked. The results I got with 42 images were far, far better. Although I did have to train them for much longer. 40 plus images and then 4,000 training generations gave me some pretty good results. Okay, finally, let's talk about some limitations of the paper. So, one big thing about the paper is that it had no examples of human subjects. Now, this means one of two things. Either these guys were really concerned about deepfakes, right? And they didn't want to put the idea in people's heads, and they didn't want to be associated with it at all. You know, maybe for funding, it looked good. It would look really bad if they were associated with deepfakes, something like that. That's one possibility. The more likely possibility, in my opinion, just because, you know, academics are people too, is that the people that they tried to generate with this method didn't turn out so well. That's kind of my suspicion. So just be prepared for some substandard results. We already know that these latent diffusion models, like, they're pretty bad at generating hands and eyes. So maybe these issues are compounded when we try to use the Dreambooth strategy, possibly. Another thing is it doesn't handle rare environments very well. You know, you might say SKS on a street and it'll give you SKS on a street. Great, fantastic. But if you ask it for SKS on the moon, it will get confused and probably won't give you SKS on the moon because that's sort of a rare environment that doesn't come up often. So, I don't know, if you wanted to put yourself on the ISS, maybe this thing just won't work for you. Okay, next, if you give it a prompt, if you use Dreambooth and then you try to generate an image with a prompt that is really similar to one of the original images, then what you'll end up getting is going to be very close to the original image. I had this a lot with Hasan, because there's this one image in my training set of him lying down. I don't know what the context of this was. And I got a lot of similar images. When I just said Hasan lying in a bed of money, all the images look really similar to this one. And finally, it seemed to work on really common subjects a lot better. So they had good results with things like cats and dogs, but, you know, more rarer things like the black-eyed leaf frog or something, some obscure fish, you may have some pretty bad results. So yeah, just more common things will give you better results with Dreambooth. Last piece of advice today. So the paper uses something called regularization images. I'm not going to get into the technicalities, but the way it works is you're trying to teach the model the concept of Uncle Jack. And the kind of thing Uncle Jack is he's a man. Now, to stop the model going crazy, what the Dreambooth guys also do is they generate a whole bunch of other images of men, just using Stable Diffusion generally. And these other images help in the training process. And one big question is, how many of these regularization images should you create? The paper recommends 200 per image. So 5 images of Uncle Jack, 1,000 regularization images. Now, I tried that. I tried using that many images. And firstly, it took a huge amount of time in the usual Colab notebook that everyone uses. It took like an hour and a half just to generate the images. After that, the results ended up being like really, really terrible. It ended up just overfitting one image, and whenever it didn't overfit that one image, it just created this garbled nonsense that barely looked like anything. So that would not be my advice. Empirically myself, I found that 128 regularization images was fine regardless of how many images you put in. So that's something you should probably play around with, but 128 worked for me. Yeah, and that's about it, guys. So if you have any questions, go ahead and just leave a YouTube comment. I'll get around to it. Or there's a Discord server as well. Whichever sort of one of those floats your boat, go ahead. I'm going to do a follow-up video like tomorrow or the day after on how I actually got the results that I got, sort of like a walkthrough. So yeah, stick around for that.